For listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Will Evans, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the January 25th, 2026 issue of the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Leading off, USAID's mission may be in tatters, but there are still ways to do good. 1 week after President Trump was inaugurated for his second term last year, I rode the elevator to my office on the 7th floor of USAID's Global Health Bureau. At 4:30 p.m. on that same day, January 27th, I and 57 of my colleagues from around the agency were out, placed on administrative leave. We were asked to leave the building, and our email access was revoked shortly thereafter. Most Americans knew little about what we did at USAID, with even fewer recognizing that our work in global health and development came at a small cost in the federal budget. The consequences of cuts in the United States global health assistance are painfully high, documented extensively in the media, in the academic literature, and analysis from the Center for Global Development, and in a deeply moving documentary. As the Chief Medical Officer for Global Health since May 2024, I had been serving the agency for nearly 9 years. I represented the U.S. government as a global health diplomat, helping shape our work on child health, immunization, polio eradication, and response to biodefense threats. I started at USAID as a remote worker, but I was so enthusiastic to serve as the Chief Medical Officer that, in 2024, I moved from Buffalo to the D.C. area with some of my family and the rest planning to follow within a year. Following USAID's shuttering, we quickly returned to Buffalo. It has been a long year. Seeing the proverbial writing on the wall when I woke up on January 28th, I began to look at job opportunities. With more than 25 years of professional experience, a medical degree, a productive research career at the University at Buffalo, and what I hoped was a reputation for being pragmatic and collaborative, I was optimistic. I would land. It would be all right. Little could I have predicted the job market that I entered, along with thousands of my global health colleagues from the U.S. government, non-governmental organizations, and multilateral organizations. Many of my former colleagues have faced long-term unemployment, defined as seeking work for 6 months or more. 1/4 of those currently jobless were identified as long-term unemployed last August, for the first time since the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Long-term unemployment can have significant adverse consequences for individuals' well-being and the health of their social relationships. The psychiatrist and philosopher Viktor Frankl described the deep unmooring that comes with joblessness. The unemployed worker's existence has become provisional, and in a certain sense, he cannot live for the future or aim at a goal, he wrote in Man's Search for Meaning. Recent conversations with fellow job seekers affirms this sense of provisional existence. Lives in the balance, futures uncertain, identities at sea. As someone who lived and breathed global health for nearly 25 years, I could not have imagined a major professional shift. But with USAID's dismantling and the global health job market in tatters, I needed to take an expansive view of what I could contribute. One of my first tasks was to write a list of all my identities, personal and professional. Who was I going to be if I couldn't be a global health diplomat? Generating a list of more than 20 options, I started with the more obvious: wife, mother, physician, and stretched to wannabe dancer. That listing led to a mantra that I have repeated thousands of times to myself and anyone willing to listen. There are many good ways to do good in the world. I have been encouraging others leaving the federal workforce typically purpose-driven professionals, to think of all of the ways in which we can do good in the world. Amid applying for nearly 100 full-time positions, I sought new professional identities, training, and serving as an executive coach and as a mediator for peaceful conflict resolution. I have built a framework to understand and guide resilience during times of transition and transformation. Job loss, the death of a loved one, a move, all are a form of change. And whether change is desired or forced, expected or acute, change can feel destabilizing, and disempowering. We are conditioned to veer, indeed to swerve, away from negative events. They are disquieting at best. What if, instead, we saw opportunity? What if we chose to build ourselves anew, finding new meaning and purpose, a way to live that honors the past and that renews us for a brighter future? In recent months, I have been talking with former colleagues and strangers about resilience, about finding our way through dark tunnels. We have talked about foundational practices such as physical activity and social connection. We have talked about evidence-based practices such as gratitude, loving kindness, and acts of service, all ways in which we can show up positively in the world, even when we believe we have nothing to give. We have talked about optimism and how an optimistic mind allows us to move effectively, see what we can control, and to control what we can control. And we have talked about equanimity, developing deeper and more lasting contentment with who we are and what we have, in contrast to ever-present dopamine-fueled highs in our digital worlds. These resilience practices will not directly put food on the table or send the kids to college, but they will allow us to make use of hard times to strengthen ourselves from within, to be steady and even strong for the hard work ahead in science, in civic engagement, and in serving the public good. Working to build our resilience is not fluff. Indeed, it is vital. So, what about me? I am among the lucky, having recently joined a respected non-governmental organization in a full-time role. But I will never be the same. Hopefully, I've changed for the better, with more resolute, more resilience. I wish the same for all of my companions on this journey. And that article was written by Pavani Ram of Clarence, and she has extensive international public health experience, primarily in child survival. Our next article is written by Fred P. Hochberg. Here's a concrete step to cut housing costs. Nearly 70% of American adults polled recently said that the central promise of the American dream, that hard work can earn a good life, is no longer true or never was. It's easy to understand why. Decades of policy choices, rising costs, and stagnant wages have eroded the path that once led from work to security. An affordability crisis is continuing to hammer working and middle-class Americans, making it harder than ever for many just to get by. At the center of this squeeze is housing, the cornerstone of the American dream. Home prices are 50% higher today than they were only 5 years ago, and Americans' paychecks have not grown to match. Young people, in particular, have been left out in the cold. The average age of first-time home buyers has climbed to 40, the highest on record. A number of ideas have been floated to address this crisis, including a ban on large institutional investors scooping up private homes, an approach put forward by congressional Democrats multiple times in recent years and raised anew by President Trump earlier this month. Some of these ideas have merit, others do not. But nearly all would take years to implement. What if there were already a program on the books that could help solve the problem right now? At the Small Business Administration, where I once served as the deputy and acting administrator, a little-known initiative called the Home Disaster Loan Program has been in operation since the 1960s, providing long-term home loans at a low, fixed interest rate for people whose homes or businesses have been damaged by natural disasters. These loans have served as a lifeline for Americans experiencing disasters, and versions of this program have been expanded during broader moments of crisis, including in the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic. Americans today are in a crisis of affordability, so why not expand the program to reach them? Congress could amend the disaster loan program and instantly drop mortgage rates by about 2.25 percentage points to about 4% for millions of Americans. For a roughly typical home buyer seeking a $500,000 house and making an 18% down payment, this simple change would cut the monthly mortgage payment to $1,950 from $2,450, saving about $6,000 a year. Crucially, this would not impose a major burden on taxpayers. In 2024, the Home Disaster Loan Program issued about 18,000 loans, with interest rates subsidized to allow homeowners and businesses to borrow at the same rate the government does. The program costs about $1 billion to operate, a relatively small portion of the Small Business Administration's budget. And because taxpayers are on the hook only for the cost of defaults, even a major expansion of the program wouldn't create a serious cost burden relative to the widespread benefits that would come from cooling off the housing market. To help mitigate those costs, Congress should maintain the program's current cap. The loans aren't available for homes over $500,000. The agency already has strong underwriting standards that ensure that loans go to dependable borrowers, not the subprime candidates whom some past government lending supported. Loans should also be made available to the many current homeowners who would love to buy a new house, but who are inadvertently keeping the housing market frozen because they feel trapped in starter homes they bought at favorable rates. Would this one quick fix solve the housing crisis? Of course not. But by lowering the financial barrier to home ownership for many, it could help take the pressure off the housing market in much the same way Americans did a century ago with the advent of the 30-year mortgage, a simple innovation that helped lift home ownership from under half of American families to nearly 2/3. The policy change I am proposing could bring about a similar effect on a smaller scale, cooling prices, eliminating volatility by replacing constantly shifting interest rates with a friendly and stable option, and opening the door for more Americans to own their own home. The President's recent openness to cracking down on high home prices, an issue long popular with Democrats, suggests that there may be a political opening for Congress and the White House to get something done. If done right, this would ease housing costs while serving nearly everyone's interests. It serves traditional liberal values by helping raise the standard of living of working Americans. It serves traditional conservative values by bringing more stability and less transience to our communities. And at a time when our leaders have struggled to improve affordability, it offers a concrete step in the right direction, one that the President, who prides himself as a builder, may find attractive. At a time when Americans are losing faith not only in the American dream, but also in the capacity and willingness of our leaders to defend it, expanding the Home Disaster Loan Program can be a small part of the antidote, a simple, immediate, tangible, bipartisan action that can improve people's lives and help restore that dream today. Fred P. Hochberg was the deputy and acting administrator of the Small Business Administration from 1998 to 2001. He is a former president of the Lillian Vernon Corporation. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Moving to the editorial page, our first article has the headline, "Go for it. Clean water initiatives are great, but New York can't leave clean air money on the table." Western New York is not alone in bearing a noxious burden of industrial pollution, But polluted communities like ours are not helpless. They can force companies to cut back on emissions, and they can create better infrastructure to help keep contaminants out of local waterways. We have that power. It's backed up by federal regulations like the U.S. Clean Water Act from 1972 and the U.S. Clean Air Act from 1970. New York State doubled down on its battle against pollution in 2019 with the passage of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. These important commitments demand the additional resources needed to build a cleaner environment for all New Yorkers. Governor Kathy Hochul has been providing such follow-up, but she could do better. First, the good news. As part of her State of the State address, Hochul laid out a 5-year, $3.75 billion proposal that would provide $750 million annually for sewer construction, lead pipe replacement, and contamination cleanup. As reported by the News' Mackenzie Schumann, Hochul would also apply the funding to projects to protect coastal waterways and shorelines. Buffalo urgently needs this help. Last summer, despite millions spent upgrading the sanitary sewer system that connects a nearby water treatment facility, Blaisdell's Woodlawn Beach had the horrible distinction of ranking as one of the worst beaches in the state for pollution by fecal bacteria. Lead pipe replacement is even more essential. In children, exposure to even low levels of lead has been linked to a range of grave health conditions, including central and peripheral nervous system damage. Unsurprisingly, but still shamefully, the federal government has proposed massive funding cuts to federal agencies and programs that work to improve stormwater infrastructure and clean up public. We value these friends on environmental matters all the more as the Trump administration continues to weaken federal regulations intended to maintain the health of Americans. Indeed, it seems human health may no longer be a matter of federal concern, at least in terms of air quality. Under President Trump and Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Lee Zeldin, the EPA plans to stop tallying the monetary value of health benefits due to curbing air pollutants. In other words, when it comes to air pollution, the value of a human life in Trump land is now zero. That's where New York State can and must step in. Unfortunately, on air pollution and emission reduction, Hochul has been slower to push for the regulation and resources required by New York's climate law. Most seriously, she has delayed New York's Clean Air Initiative, which was proposed by the state in 2023 and was supposed to be implemented beginning in 2024. The Clean Air Initiative, also known as Cap and Invest, sets a declining limit on emissions that companies could produce. After that limit is reached, companies must pay to pollute. These funds would then be used to help New York ultimately reduce greenhouse gas emissions 85% by 2050. This money is needed. It answers the naysayers who insist the state cannot afford to move to a green energy economy. As Schumann reported, a study published January 8th by the nonprofit Environmental Defense Fund and research firm Greenline Insights said the state will miss out on $48 billion worth of economic benefits unless it implements Cap and Invest. According to the study, Western New York would realize $3.3 billion under the initiative. The study also found that hundreds of thousands of jobs could be created, mostly in the construction and utilities industries, and millions of dollars saved by households, as residents receive rebates, use less energy, and benefit in other ways. Clean energy is the future. New York must not align itself with those who deny this, as they deny the effects of climate change. New York is smarter than that. Our next article is from the Another Voice column with the insurance is the topic. This is written by the Reverend James A. Lewis, who is president of the Buffalo Niagara National Action Network. Broken system for auto coverage hurts many. For decades, auto insurance in New York has operated as a quiet but punishing injustice, one that hits working families hardest and falls especially heavily on communities of color. Across Western New York, families pay premiums far above the national average, not because they are riskier drivers, but because they are trapped in a broken system that has gone unreformed for far too long. Governor Kathy Hochul's new plan to rein in these costs is a significant step forward. The effort is not merely about adjusting premiums. It is about fairness, accountability, and acknowledging that insurance affordability is fundamentally an economic equity issue. The financial burden has reached a breaking point. Statewide, drivers pay roughly $4,000 a year for full auto insurance, nearly $1,500 more than the national average. These payments weigh heavily on families already struggling to make ends meet. For many, owning a car is not optional. It is essential for getting to work, school, childcare, and medical appointments. When insurance costs climb to hundreds of dollars a month, transportation becomes unsustainable. A missed payment can mean a lapse in coverage, which can quickly lead to lost employment. This is how an unfair insurance system quietly locks people out of economic opportunity. These high costs are not driven by safer roads or better consumer protection. Instead, they are fueled by widespread fraud and a legal environment that has spiraled out of control. In 2023, New York recorded more than 38,000 suspected cases of motor vehicle insurance fraud, including over 1,700 staged crashes. This acts as a fraud tax on law-abiding drivers, adding an estimated $100 to $300 to every policy each year. Communities of color bear this burden disproportionately. Studies show drivers in predominantly black neighborhoods often pay up to 30% more for identical coverage, even with similar driving records. In Buffalo, where a car is often a lifeline, lowering insurance costs means families can keep jobs, seniors can reach doctors, and young people can pursue opportunity. As a pastor and community leader, I see the strain every day. If enacted, the governor's plans can deliver long overdue fairness to working families across Western New York. And we have two articles in the Viewpoints section today. The first one is written by Froma Harrop. What if Trump made war on Minneapolis and nobody came? President Trump's approval ratings are down the drain. The midterms are coming, and if Democrats prevail, his agenda gets boxed in fast. What can he do to avoid that outcome? Well, what's worked in the past? Immigration. Former President Joe Biden had irresponsibly left borders open for too long, a failure that suited Trump just fine. A bipartisan fix emerged, and Trump pressured Republicans to reject it. He needed a show. Few foreigners are entering the country illegally these days, and so Trump had to create the appearance of a new immigration crisis. Easy. Send armies of immigration and customs enforcement agents into Minneapolis. In doing so, he tried to link a fraud investigation, one involving many members of the Somali community, to illegal immigration. The swindles are outrageous, but most of the Somalis involved are in this country legally. That is not an immigration issue, but Trump is an expert at mixing things up. Another advantage to making war in Minneapolis was the knowledge that many in that generally liberal city would give him that war and provide street theater for media coverage. The performers came out on cue and put on shows. Most were peaceful. Others threatened violence and brought tensions to a boil. Cecil B. DeMille had nothing on Trump in creating spectacle. Unlike DeMille, Trump cast order as the hero and ragtag discontents as the villains. The ICE officers didn't send themselves into these cities. Trump did. They were being used by Trump on one side while being provoked by the other. There was really no excuse for a protest at a church in St. Paul, where a pastor reportedly also worked as an ICE agent. The ICE agents really are not the enemies here. It's the people who put them in impossible situations. What transpired in the fatal shooting of Renee Good should be settled by an in-depth federal investigation. Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara said that the more the Trump administration refuses to conduct one, the more frustration builds here among the people I speak to. To stoke more chaos, the Trump administration has given ICE daily quotas on the number of arrests. That forces them to hassle brown people without cause. Trump campaigned on the promise to at first limit these resources for undocumented immigrants who had committed crimes. He broke that promise, and his brutal campaign against immigrants, legal or otherwise, is a big reason his poll numbers on immigration went negative. The worry for Democrats is that some of their prominent figures may help Trump by playing the abolish ICE card again. That was very bad for them last time. Most Americans support immigration, but want it kept legal. Abolish ICE sounds a lot like defund the police. Abolish ICE probably cost Wisconsin Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes and Democrats a Senate seat in 2022. He lost to Republican Senator Ron Johnson by a hair. What if these armies of agents showed up and the town answered by pulling the shades and turning on the TV? Confrontation is Trump's preferred setting, and confusion caused by a multitude of players blurs the lines. Note that Trump hasn't sent the forces into conservative Texas or Florida, states with far higher percentages of undocumented immigrants than Minnesota. And he has cut back on raids in California farm country, where undocumented immigrants provide much of the labor. Trump's latest verbal escalation, contained in threats to invoke the Insurrection Act and send in active duty troops, suggests he's worried the temperature may soon drop. Democrats, don't be suckers. And our next article is written by Susan Estrich. Some big news. We aren't going to invade Greenland after all. But Minneapolis is still on the table. The news out of Davos on Wednesday morning was that President Trump told world leaders that he does not plan to use force to take Greenland. It's actually a relief to hear him say that, even in bellicose tones. After all, for the last 2 weeks, the administration has studiously avoided ruling out the use of force to capture the territory. Speaking on NBC's Meet the Press on Sunday, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent attempted to justify the president's call for tariffs on countries that oppose the United States' acquisition of Greenland, suggesting that tariffs were preferable to some form of armed conflict over the territory. The national emergency is avoiding a national emergency, Bessent said, adding that the president was using the economic might of the U.S. to avoid a hot war. And on Tuesday, when asked how far he will go to acquire the Kingdom of Denmark's territory, Trump told reporters, "You'll find out." He was teasing. What a jokester. It's almost as funny as the social media trip he took the other night, until the early morning hours of Tuesday, posting a photoshopped map where Canada and Greenland are part of the United States, along with, later that night, a photo of him, backed by Vance and Rubio, planting the American flag in Greenland, U.S. territory established 2026, along with leaked text from European leaders trying to appease his ego and walk him back from the edge. What does it say about all of us that we are honestly relieved that the man we elected is not about to invade our ally and literally destroy NATO, the 80-year-old alliance that has contributed greatly to what stability we have in the world? He is that crazy, isn't he? And what do we do about it? Invoke the 25th Amendment, says my friend Ed Markey, Democratic senator from Massachusetts. Not going to happen. The 25th Amendment would require the majority of Trump's cabinet to turn on him and declare him unfit to serve. This is the cabinet with more sycophants per capita than any in my memory. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is the highest funded law enforcement agency in this country. Did we vote for that? Food stamps are being cut, Medicaid is being cut, and the average ICE agent is making $100,000 a year, not necessarily even with a high school degree, and they're hiring. He is having his way and tearing this country apart. A free press, which he is constantly trying to emasculate, last week threatened to sue CBS if they edited an interview with him. We should all be thankful to the courageous federal district judges who have literally put themselves at risk by reining in some of the worst excesses of this administration. However, the Supreme Court still needs to do more to support the judges on the front line. Congress? There are plenty of Democrats screaming bloody murder and raising campaign funds to run against Donald Trump. Winning the House in the midterms is the surest way to stop this man. Helping Democrats across the country do that is the most important thing those who want to stop Trump can do. It's not Democratic voices that are missing from the debate, but Republicans at the local and national level, at least those who are willing to say, as Kentucky Republican Rand Paul did this week, that Greenland is not an emergency justifying a new round of tariffs. Emergency powers are for emergencies, Paul said on Meet the Press. There's no emergency with Greenland. That's ridiculous. Who will say this to Trump? How many people need to protest? And will he listen? You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. And we'll take a look now at the business section, and our first article is a spotlight on real estate written by David Robinson. 4 towns here among most competitive in U.S. housing. Trying to buy a home in the town of Tonawanda isn't just competitive by local standards. It's one of the most competitive municipal housing markets in the country, according to real estate tracker Redfin. There are only enough homes for sale in the town of Tonawanda to cover about half a month's home sales, which helps make it the 4th most competitive housing market in the country, Redfin said. Just behind, at number 6, is North Tonawanda. There are only enough homes on the market to cover a month's worth of sales. That competition means homes in those towns sell fast. In the town of Tonawanda, about 40% of the homes sell within 2 weeks of hitting the market. In North Tonawanda, 48% sell within 2 weeks. And that competition pushes up prices too. Town of Tonawanda homes sell for an average of 9% above their most recent listing price, while in North Tonawanda, the premium is a little more than 8%, Redfin said. And there were 2 other Western New York communities that just missed being in the top 10. Cheektowaga was number 11, with homes selling at an average premium of 8% and with the median home spending less than 2 weeks on the market. West Seneca was number 12, with 44% of the homes selling within 2 weeks and an average premium of 8% above the most recent listing price. Affordability and the supply of housing play a big role in how competitive a market is. All of the 4 Buffalo Niagara markets on the list had median sale prices below $300,000, and the region has very few new homes being built. Just 74 homes were built during November in Buffalo, while Austin, Texas built 3,465, Redfin noted. Competition and affordability are closely connected, said Asad Khan, a senior economist at Redfin. Jonathan D. Epstein writes our next article, New Land Use Plan for Touts Small Growth for North Tonawanda. The city of North Tonawanda has a new land use plan to guide decisions about development and infrastructure based on smart, sustainable, and equitable growth principles. The plan, developed with $100,000 in funding from the State Department of State's Smart Growth Community Planning Program, was adopted by the city, which is now also developing an updated zoning code to implement the plan. That second step is also supported by the state program to the tune of $135,000. North Tonawanda's comprehensive plan reflects our community's vision for residents, businesses, and visitors alike, said Mayor Austin Tylick. It provides a clear roadmap for smart growth. Smart growth principles include the use of walkable, bikeable, and transit-accessible streetscapes, compact, mixed-use development, diverse housing options, safe and accessible parks and public spaces that are inclusive, age-friendly community design and amenities, and climate resiliency. North Tonawanda is kicking off the new year on the right foot with this visionary smart growth plan, which will guide land use decisions and improve economic development, housing, and quality of life for this Erie Canal community well into the future, said New York Secretary of State Walter T. Mosley. He added, the city's commitment to downtown revitalization, brownfield redevelopment, affordable housing, and creating accessible public spaces can serve as a model for communities throughout the state. Funded through the state's Environmental Protection Fund, the Smart Growth Planning Program provides financial support to municipalities and counties for developing comprehensive plans, localized area plans, and zoning ordinances that use smart growth principles. Since it was created in 2021, the state program has funded 129 projects with nearly $12 million. Passing the torch. A third-generation family-owned concrete contractor on Buffalo's east side has hit a new milestone as it passed the mantle of leadership. It's now not only minority-owned, but woman-owned. Clarissa Sorianello has taken the reins of Sorianello General Concrete Contractor as president and majority owner from her father, Frank. She holds a master's degree in business administration and has a background in psychology. It's an incredible honor to continue the legacy that my family has built, Sorianello said. My chapter of leadership will be focused on advancing the growth, strategic planning, and standards embodying our family's business name, while remaining rooted in the same principles that have guided Sorianello for decades: integrity, reliability, and a commitment to quality workmanship. Founded in 1957, the unionized company is one of the leading concrete contractors in Buffalo, Erie County, and across the state. It specializes in heavy highway and heavy civil slip-form concrete paving, but also handles barrier walls, curbs, and sidewalks. Major clients include the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Department of Transportation, the State Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration, and the State Thruway Authority. An historic status sought for Niagara Street site. Just weeks after a Buffalo-born New York City doctor purchased a 4-story mixed-use building on Niagara Street, he's now seeking to have it added to the Upper Black Rock Historic District to gain the benefit of a historic designation. Dr. Ezra Bernstein, a hematology and oncology fellow at Columbia University Irving Medical Center, bought the 12,768 square foot building at 1287 Niagara in December from Christoph Forth's Forth Property Brothers LLC for $475,000. The building, which includes a small 2-story Italianate-style commercial section in front, includes 8 apartments and 1,000 square feet of commercial space. Its first floor and rear section are painted white, while the rest is red brick. Forth, who acquired the property in April 2021 from Ellicott Development Company for $440,000, has filed plans with the city in December 2023 to renovate the building, but did not complete the work. Now, Bernstein's JZ Niagara LLC is asking the Common Council to add the building to the historic district, which includes buildings across the street and less than a block away. The Preservation Board already recommended approval of the request, citing the property's contribution to the late 19th and early 20th century industrial history of the area, and its historic relationship to road, rail, and water transportation that was part of the area's physical development. By having the building included in the historic district, Bernstein said he plans to pursue a full renovation project using state and federal historic tax credits that are critical to the project's viability in order to rehabilitate the building while maintaining its historic integrity. He plans to spend about $1 million. Constructed in 1895, with a commercial addition in 1929, the building is eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places, according to the application. Its period of significance ran from its construction through 1960. "It is a great building in a great location," he said. "I love Niagara Street and am happy to contribute to its revitalization while also maintaining integrity of the neighborhood." Turning to retail now, Samantha Christman writes the article with the headline, "GameStop closes 3 local stores as sales decline." GameStop will close 3 stores in Erie and Niagara counties as part of a wave of nationwide closings. A slew of GameStop stores were listed as closed Tuesday on the Texas-based company's website. Affected are 3 stores in western New York: at 3500 Main Street near Bailey Avenue, 4960 Transit Road in Depew near Lawson Road, and 5716 South Transit Road in Lockport near Walmart Supercenter. The video game retailer could not be reached for comment. In March, GameStop said it would close a significant number of stores in the current fiscal year, which ends January 31st. Consumers opting to download games rather than buy physical copies of them has been a cause of its decline, GameStop said. The current consoles from Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft have facilitated download technology, GameStop wrote in Securities and Exchange Commission filings. If consumers' preference for downloading video game content in lieu of physical software continues to increase, our business and financial performance may be adversely impacted. The company closed 590 stores during the 2024 fiscal year and had more than 3,000 stores left worldwide, according to filings. GameStop stores remain at 1595 Niagara Falls Boulevard in Amherst, the Boulevard Shopping Center, 2730 Delaware Avenue in Delaware, Consumer Square, at Walden Galleria in Cheektowaga, 740 Thruway Plaza Drive in Thruway Plaza, 6733 Transit Road near Worley Plaza in Amherst, 1024 Union Road, Southgate Plaza in West Seneca, 1637 Military Road in Niagara Falls Wegmans Plaza, and 3701 McKinley Parkway in Blaisdell. GameStop's recent store closures come against the backdrop of one of the most unusual chapters in modern financial history: its transformation, however brief, into a so-called meme stock. Long known as a brick-and-mortar retailer of video games and consoles, GameStop was doing business in a challenging environment by the 2010s. The rise of digital game downloads, online competitors, and subscription gaming services steadily eroded foot traffic and sales at physical stores. By 2019, the company was closing hundreds of locations and reporting declining revenues, leading many professional investors to bet against the stock through short selling. In late 2020 and early 2021, individual investors on the Reddit forum r/Wall Street Bets began aggressively buying GameStop shares and call options. Their motivations were a mix of speculation, internet humor, and a coordinated attempt to trigger a short squeeze, a scenario in which rising stock prices force short sellers to buy shares to cover their positions, driving prices even higher. GameStop stock, which had traded below $20 for much of 2020, surged dramatically in January 2021, at one point reaching an intraday high of over $480. The rally drew global attention, turning GameStop into a cultural symbol of retail investors challenging Wall Street hedge funds. Several firms with large short positions reportedly suffered significant losses as the stock price spiked. The episode was amplified by social media platforms, live streams, and trading apps that made stock trading accessible to millions of first-time investors. GameStop quickly became the most prominent example of a meme stock, shares whose prices were driven less by company fundamentals than by the buzz it was generating online. And we'd like to remind you that you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Now back to Samantha Chrisman's article, Shake Shack Plans Third Local Store. Shake Shack is wasting no time building additional locations in Erie County after opening its first local restaurant at 1531 Niagara Falls Boulevard in Amherst in May. The New York City headquartered burger chain is planning its third location at 2765 Delaware Avenue in Kenmore, the company said. It will require the redevelopment of the former Kenmore Presbyterian Church that is currently on the site. Another full-service Shake Shack is in the works at 5205 Transit Road in Clarence, in a former Spot Coffee. That site will open this year. In addition to the full-service Shake Shack at Boulevard, the company has opened a limited-service location at the Thruways Angola rest stop. And Francesca's to close. Francesca's, a mall-based women's clothing retailer, is closing its more than 450 stores, one of which is in the Walden Galleria. The store is in the process of liquidating its inventory and running sales. Most items are currently marked at 20% off the retail price. The store is located on Walden Galleria's lower level near Dick's. There used to be a Francesca store at the Fashion Outlets of Niagara Falls, USA, but that store closed as part of widespread shutdowns announced in 2020, when Francesca's filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Most Francesca stores are located in traditional enclosed malls, which have seen traffic drop dramatically in recent years. This year, however, mall traffic increased at just over 1%, according to Pacer.ai, which provides foot traffic analytics. Our next article is written by Chauncey Maddox of Kiplinger's Personal Finance, Millennial Money Moves. Many baby boomers have done well for themselves financially. An Alliance Global Wealth Report found that boomers, born from 1946 to 1964, have become the wealthiest generation in history. But across housing, investing, retirement planning, and careers, millennials are rewriting the playbook boomers used because the math, the market, and the workplace have all changed. Millennials aren't rejecting wealth building, they're updating it to fit the times. Here are 4 money habits millennials are moving away from and the factors driving those shifts. Number 1, choosing to rent over buying. For boomers, owning a home was the default wealth plan and a cornerstone of the American dream. Today, higher prices and elevated mortgage rates make the buy versus rent decision less clear, especially for millennials and younger generations. The National Association of Realtors, which tracks affordability, recently reported that the average monthly mortgage payment rose 3%, while the median price of a single-family home increased by the same amount. Though mortgage rates eased slightly from their peaks, they recently remained above 6% for a 30-year fixed loan, well above the 2 to 4% rates that many earlier buyers locked in. Add to that a steep drop in first-time buyers' market share and a rise in the median first-time buyer age from 35 to 38, and you see why more millennials are renting longer to preserve cash flow and flexibility. While some millennials might feel as if buying a home is not an option right now given their finances, others are choosing to continue renting and put more money toward investments and other goals instead. Number 2, moving money out of safe accounts and into investments. Boomers were more likely to lean on certificates of deposit, savings accounts, and annuities, which are solid tools in the right context. Millennials, by contrast, are starting earlier with market investing, often using low-cost index funds and target date funds inside 401ks and IRAs. According to Vanguard's 2024 How America Saves report, more younger workers are enrolling in retirement accounts and choosing professionally managed allocations that help keep their investments on track. Millennials and Gen Z people also are taking advantage of user-friendly mobile investing apps and commission-free trading platforms, as well as robo-advisors, which all help streamline their investing strategy. Number 3, planning for retirement without pensions or Social Security. Private sector pensions that once guaranteed lifetime income largely have disappeared. Today, only about 15% of private industry owners have access to a defined benefit plan. That shift pushed millennials towards self-funded retirement vehicles such as 401ks and IRAs. On the Social Security side, trustees project the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund will be depleted by 2033 under current law. After that, payroll taxes would still cover most benefits, but uncertainty around the program is nudging millennials to save more on their own. Financial expert Susie Orman recommends younger savers consider Roth 401k or 403b or Roth IRA savings options because they can reduce future tax risk and avoid required minimum distributions later in retirement. And number 4, leaving behind the idea of staying at one company for life. Boomers often build careers and benefits by staying put. Millennials, however, entered a job market where skills, not loyalty, drive pay and opportunity. That shift led to shorter stints at individual companies and more lateral moves. Today, the median job tenure across workers is under 4 years, reflecting a labor market that rewards mobility and continuous upskilling. Flexibility also matters. Many younger workers prefer hybrid setups and value employers that support well-being and growth, even if that means switching jobs to get it. Surveys consistently show millennials prioritize flexibility and development over long-term lock-in. Our last column is from the My View section, the My View column, and it's written by Jim Costa of Depew, who thinks his childhood discipline may have been on the harsh side. Discipline is good, up to a point. Most everyone born in the 1930s or 40s has earned the right to be a curmudgeon in their advanced years. The reason is that we were raised with 2 outdated beliefs. Children should be seen and not heard, and, even more unfashionable now, spare the rod and spoil the child. My 2 younger sisters and I quintessential products of the times. When our mother took us visiting, we were to sit and say nothing. If offered a cookie or cocoa, our eyes flashed to our mother. In that instant, her eyes flashed acceptance or refusal, which we followed with, "No thank you, we just ate." I don't exactly remember how I felt seeing most of our cousins acting up and running around yelling and playing while we 3 sat still as statues. I do know, however, that this kind of discipline worked well for our parents, who believed they were doing the proper thing. However, at the same time they were teaching us consideration for others, they were also teaching us subservience. This more than stifles self-esteem. It creates a sense of unworthiness and often undermines the belief one is loved. That early discipline worked well for us in our early school years. Always in the background, we followed all the rules and became model students. Although my 3rd grade teacher embarrassed me at the end of the year when she announced that I had received the highest grade in the class, she gave my ego an enormously gratifying lift. So it went until I reached my 13th birthday and started 8th grade. About a half dozen of us developed into troublemakers. Together, we gave our teacher the worst year of her life by pulling pranks that continually disrupted the class, a few of which can't be described. We were even worse outside of class. That year, I went from passivity to rebelliousness. Trouble followed me into high school, where I was eventually expelled by my English teacher. The same behavior continued after I joined the service in 1951. My innate resistance to authority created endless trouble for me. I was demoted for going AWOL, fighting, and everyday conflicts with others. Somehow I avoided jail and survived my time. Nothing really changed until half a dozen years later, when I met my future wife, Jeanette, who talked me into going back to school. On the basis of a GED, I took an entry test at the University at Buffalo and was let in on probation. Despite persistent problems with regimentation and rules, I managed to get my degree in English. When I became a teacher, I vowed to avoid conflicts. Although difficult to restrain myself at times, I swallowed my anger and kept my word. One positive aspect of my past helped me to establish a rapport with a number of troubled students. Over the years, I never had to send one to the office. Most of my anger has now been dissipated, and I have no need or inclination to become a curmudgeon. However, I fear that while many of my era never rebelled growing up, others harbored an anger that smoldered over the years. Eventually, they have become dour and often fiery curmudgeons who forever live with the pain of crushing early discipline. Most likely, these curmudgeons are still starved for a love they felt they never had. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the January 25th, 2026 issue of the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News. We read from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News every Sunday at 6 p.m. Your reader has been Will Evans. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the National Enquirer. At 8 p.m., we have People Magazine. And at 9 o'clock, we have the New York Times Book Review. Stay tuned for these readings and more. And if you have any comments, suggestions, or questions, please stay with us. If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Zero, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or